I woke up to my doorbell ringing at 5:30 in the morning, the kind of aggressive, repeated stabbing at the button that made my heart race before I even opened my eyes. My wife Zara was still asleep next to me, and I grabbed my phone to check the time, groaning when I saw how early it was. The doorbell kept ringing and I stumbled out of bed, pulling on sweatpants and a t-shirt as I made my way downstairs in our Columbus, Ohio home. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I could make out a figure standing on my porch, and when I opened it, I was hit with a blast of freezing February air. Standing there was Patricia Hendricks, the president of our Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association, clipboard in hand, wearing a puffy purple coat and a scowl that looked permanently etched into her face. "Daniel Harrington," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I am issuing you a violation notice for failure to maintain your property in accordance with HOA regulations, Section 12, Paragraph 4. I blinked at her, still half asleep. "What are you talking about?" She thrust the clipboard toward me, a printed form already filled out with my name and address. "Your driveway is covered in ice. This presents a safety hazard and violates our community standards. You have 24 hours to remedy the situation, and you're being fined $250. I looked past her at my driveway. Sure enough, there was a thin layer of ice coating the asphalt, glinting in the dim light from the street lamp. "Patricia, it's 5:30 in the morning." It probably froze overnight. I was going to salt it when I woke up. "The violation occurred at 5:15 when I conducted my routine inspection," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "The time of remediation is irrelevant. The violation has been documented." "You were inspecting driveways at 5:15 in the morning?" I asked, incredulous. "As HOA president, it is my duty to ensure all properties maintain our community standards at all times," Patricia said, her chin lifting. "The CC and Articus clearly state that homeowners must keep their driveways clear of ice and snow. You signed these documents when you purchased your home." I rubbed my face, trying to wake up enough to deal with this absurdity. "Patricia, this is ridiculous. Nobody salts their driveway at dawn." "I'll handle it this morning." "The fine stands," she said, tearing off a copy of the violation notice and handing it to me. "Payment is due within 10 business days. Good morning, Mr. Harrington." She turned and walked down my porch steps carefully. I noticed, because they also had a light coating of ice, which she apparently didn't consider a violation when it came to her own navigation. I watched her get into her silver Lexus and drive away, then looked down at the paper in my hand. The violation notice was printed on official-looking letterhead, complete with our neighborhood logo and a list of regulations I'd supposedly violated. The fine amount was clearly stated, along with a warning that failure to pay would result in additional penalties and potential legal action. I went back inside and tossed the paper on the kitchen counter, then went to the garage to get my ice melt. The sun wasn't even up yet, but I spread the granules across my driveway anyway, watching them start to work on the thin ice. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes, and I stood there in the freezing cold, my breath forming clouds in the air, thinking about how insane it was that I'd been fined for something that would have resolved itself as soon as the sun came up. When I went back inside, Zara was up, making coffee. "What was all that about?" she asked. "Patricia fined us for having ice on the driveway," I said, showing her the notice. Zara read it, her eyebrows climbing higher with each line. "She came here at 5:30 in the morning to fine you for ice that probably formed at 4 a.m. "Apparently she does routine inspections at dawn," I said. "This is getting out of hand, Zara. This is the 3rd fine this year, and it's only February." She handed the paper back to me. "What were the other ones for?" January, she fined us because our trash cans were visible from the street, I said. Even though we put them out the night before trash day, which is literally what everyone does. Before that, in December, she said our Christmas lights weren't the approved white color. They were warm white instead of cool white. How much were those fines? Zara asked. 150 each, I said. And I paid them because I didn't want to deal with the hassle, but this is different. This is harassment. Zara sipped her coffee, looking at the violation notice again. You know what, you're right. This is crazy. We pay HOA dues every month and Patricia acts like she owns the entire neighborhood. Maybe you should fight this one. I picked up my phone and took a picture of the notice, then another picture of my driveway with the ice melt already working, the ice turning slushy. I'm going to call a lawyer, I said. I'm done with this. You know a lawyer who handles this kind of thing? Zara asked. Mike from work was complaining about his HOA last month, I said. He mentioned he had a lawyer look at some stuff. I'll ask him for a recommendation. When I got to work that morning, I worked as a project manager at a software company downtown. I immediately found Mike in his cubicle. He looked up when I knocked on the partition. Hey Daniel, what's up? You mentioned you had a lawyer help you with HOA issues, I said. Can I get their information? Mike leaned back in his chair. Yeah, Rebecca Chen. She specializes in property law and HOA disputes. She's tough. Why, what's going on? I told him about the Dawn violation and Mike shook his head. Man, that's insane. Yeah, call Rebecca. She helped me when my HOA tried to fine me for parking my truck in my own driveway. Apparently it was too commercial looking or something. She wrote them one letter and they backed off immediately. He wrote down Rebecca Chen's number and handed it to me. Tell her I referred you. She's not cheap, but she's worth it. I called the number during my lunch break and a receptionist answered. Chen and Associates, how may I help you? Hi, I'd like to speak with Rebecca Chen about an HOA dispute, I said. Mike Patterson referred me. One moment, please, the receptionist said, and I was put on hold for about 30 seconds before a woman's voice came on the line. This is Rebecca Chen. Miss Chen, my name is Daniel Harrington. I live in Meadowbrook Heights in Columbus and I'm having issues with my HOA. Mike Patterson recommended I call you. Tell me what's happening, she said, and I heard the sound of typing in the background. I explained the situation, from the early morning violation to the previous fines. When I finished, Rebecca was quiet for a moment. So to be clear, she came to your house at 5:30 in the morning to issue a violation for ice that had formed overnight, before you would reasonably be awake to address it. That's correct, I said. And you've been fined 3 times in 3 months for what sound like minor or subjective violations. Yes, I said. You have documentation of all the violations and fines, Rebecca asked. I have the notices, and I have proof I paid the first 2, I said. I also took pictures of the driveway this morning after I put down ice melt. Good, Rebecca said. That's good. Listen, Daniel, what you're describing sounds like targeted harassment, and it may violate your state's HOA regulations. Ohio has specific laws about how HOAs can operate and what constitutes reasonable enforcement. I'd like to take a look at your HOA's CC and RTCS, your bylaws, and these violation notices. Can you come in for a consultation? How much do you charge? I asked. My consultation fee is $200, she said. If I take your case, my hourly rate is $350, but in HOA disputes where the association is found to be acting improperly, we can often recover legal fees. I've had good success with that in Ohio. I thought about the growing stack of fines and the principle of the matter. Okay, when can I come in? How's tomorrow at 3? She asked. That works, I said. Should I bring anything specific? Bring all your HOA documents, everything you signed when you bought the house, all violation notices, proof of payment for any fines, and any correspondence you've had with the HOA board. Also bring pictures if you have them, Rebecca said. And Daniel, don't pay this latest fine yet. Let me review everything first. I agreed and hung up, feeling a mixture of anxiety and relief. I was actually doing something instead of just accepting Patricia's increasingly absurd power trips. That evening, I dug through our home files and found the folder with all our HOA documents. The CC and Articus were over 40 pages long, single-spaced, covering everything from fence heights to mailbox styles. I skimmed through them, finding the section Patricia had cited about keeping driveways clear of ice and snow. The language was vague, stating that homeowners must maintain their properties in a safe and visually appealing manner, and that driveways should be kept clear of excessive snow and ice accumulation. There was no definition of what constituted excessive, and no mention of inspection times or reasonable response periods. I also found the bylaws, which outlined how the HOA board operated, how violations were supposed to be reported and processed, and what homeowners' rights were in disputing fines. According to the bylaws, homeowners had the right to request a hearing before the board to contest any violation, and the board was required to provide written notice of violations with photographic evidence. I checked the violation notice Patricia had given me. There were no photographs attached, just her handwritten notes and signature. The next day, I left work early and drove to Rebecca Chen's office, which was in a modern building near downtown. The office itself was professional but not overly fancy, with glass walls and contemporary furniture. Rebecca met me in the lobby, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. "Daniel, come on back," she said, leading me to her office. "Let's see what we're dealing with." I spread the documents across her desk, and she spent about 20 minutes reading through everything, making notes on a legal pad. Finally, she sat back and looked at me. "Your HOA has some problems," she said. "First, according to your bylaws, violation notices must include photographic evidence. This one doesn't. Second, the bylaws state that routine inspections must be conducted during reasonable hours, defined as between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., unless responding to an emergency complaint. 5:15 a.m. doesn't qualify. So the violation isn't valid?" I asked. "The violation itself might be valid under a strict interpretation of the CC and Articus, but the manner in which it was issued violates your HOA's own bylaws," Rebecca said. "Third, and this is important, the bylaws state that the HOA president cannot unilaterally issue fines. Violations are supposed to be reviewed by the full board, and homeowners must be given an opportunity to respond before fines are assessed." She tapped the violation notice. "Patricia Hendricks appears to be running your HOA like her personal fiefdom. That's not legal. Now, let's look at your previous fines." I showed her the notices from January and December. Rebecca examined them both carefully. "Same issues," she said. "No photos, unilateral decision-making, and in the case of the Christmas lights, the CC and Articus don't actually specify cool white versus warm white. They just say tasteful holiday decorations are permitted. And the trash can violation is even worse. Your CC and Articus say cans can't be left out continuously, but specifically allow them to be placed at the curb the evening before collection. She fined you for following the rules." "So what do we do?" I asked. Rebecca leaned forward. "We fight back. I'm going to send a formal letter to your HOA board, demanding they rescind all 3 fines and refund the money you already paid." I'm also going to point out the numerous procedural violations and put them on notice that if they continue this pattern of harassment, we'll file a lawsuit for declaratory relief and seek damages. Can we actually win damages? I asked. Possibly, Rebecca said. Ohio law allows for recovery of legal fees and costs when an HOA acts in bad faith or violates its own governing documents. We can also argue emotional distress from harassment, though that's harder to prove. But the threat alone might be enough to make them back off. How much is this going to cost me? I asked. I'll need a retainer of $2,000, Rebecca said. That covers the initial letter, review of their response, and preliminary research. If this goes to litigation, we're looking at more, but like I said, we can seek to recover those costs. And honestly, based on what I'm seeing, I don't think this will go to court. HOAs usually fold when they realize they're in the wrong and facing a lawyer who knows the law. I thought about it for about 10 seconds. The principle mattered more than the money at this point. Let's do it. Rebecca smiled. Good. I'll have the letter drafted and sent by the end of the week. In the meantime, document everything. If Patricia or anyone from the HOA contacts you, write down the date, time, and what was said. If they send more violation notices, don't pay them, just forward them to me immediately. I left her office feeling more confident than I had in weeks. For the first time since moving into Meadowbrook Heights 2 years ago, I felt like I had some power in dealing with Patricia's tyranny. That weekend, I was outside washing my car when my neighbor Gary walked over. Gary lived 3 houses down and had been in the neighborhood for about 5 years. "Hey Daniel," he said. "I heard Patricia hit you with a fine for ice on your driveway." "Word travels fast," I said. Gary shook his head. "She's been getting worse. I got fined last month because my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. She actually came out with a measuring tape." "You're kidding," I said. "I wish I was," Gary said. "A bunch of us are getting pretty fed up. There's been talk about trying to recall her from the board, but nobody wants to deal with the drama." "Well, I hired a lawyer," I said. "I'm fighting the fines." Gary's eyes widened. "Seriously? Good for you, man. Let me know how it goes. If you need people to testify about her behavior or whatever, I'm in." Over the next few days, I heard from 3 other neighbors who'd had similar experiences with Patricia. One had been fined for having a wreath on their door that was too large. Another got a violation for parking a moving truck in front of their house while they unloaded. A third had been cited for having a lawn ornament that wasn't pre-approved, even though it was a simple garden gnome. It became clear that Patricia had been systematically targeting people throughout the neighborhood, and everyone was too intimidated or exhausted to fight back. On Thursday, Rebecca called me. "Letter is done and went out certified mail today. They'll have it by Saturday." I also sent a copy via email to expedite things. "What happens now?" I asked. "We wait for their response," she said. "They have 14 days to reply under Ohio law. My guess is you'll hear something sooner than that." I heard something much sooner than that. On Sunday morning, my phone rang at 8 a.m. It was an unknown number, but I answered. "Hello, Mr. Harrington, this is Patricia Hendricks." Her voice was clipped and angry. "I received a very concerning letter from an attorney claiming to represent you." "That's correct," I said. "Rebecca Chen is my lawyer." "This is completely unnecessary and inappropriate," Patricia said. "If you had concerns about the violations, you should have requested a hearing with the board through proper channels." "According to my lawyer, the violations themselves were issued through improper channels," I said. "And I'm not interested in discussing this with you directly, Patricia. All communication should go through my attorney." "You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're causing? The HOA board is made up of volunteers trying to maintain property values. We don't deserve to be threatened with lawsuits for doing our jobs. If you were following your own bylaws, there wouldn't be an issue, I said. Like I said, talk to my lawyer. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. It wasn't easy standing up to Patricia. She had that kind of aggressive personality that made you want to back down just to avoid conflict, but I felt good about holding my ground. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Different number, also unknown. Hello, Mr. Harrington, this is Donald Kramer. I'm the vice president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA board. I'm calling to discuss the situation with Miss Hendricks. Does Patricia know you're calling me? I asked. No, Donald said, and he sounded tired. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Patricia has been running the HOA board like her own personal kingdom for the past year. The rest of us, there are 5 board members total, have been trying to rein her in, but she's very forceful and frankly, most people don't want the confrontation. Okay, I said, not sure where this was going. Your lawyer's letter was a wake-up call, Donald continued. I've been on this board for 3 years, and I know we've been violating our own procedures. Patricia convinced us that we needed to be more strict about enforcement to protect property values, but she's been taking it too far. Some of us have been talking, and we want to resolve this without legal action. What are you proposing? I asked. I can't make any official offers without a board vote, Donald said. But I wanted you to know that not everyone on the board supports how this has been handled. We're having an emergency meeting tomorrow night. Would you be willing to attend and give us a chance to make this right? I need to talk to my lawyer, I said. Of course, Donald said. The meeting is at 7 p.m. at the community center. You're welcome to bring your attorney if you want. I called Rebecca immediately after we hung up. She listened to my summary of both conversations, then said, "Don't go to that meeting without me. I'll be there. This might be an attempt to intimidate you or get you to say something they can use against you." You think? I asked. Donald seemed genuine. Maybe he is, Rebecca said. But Patricia will definitely be there, and I don't trust her not to try something. Let me handle this. Monday evening, Zara and I drove to the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for HOA meetings and occasional social events. Rebecca met us in the parking lot. "Remember," she said as we walked in, "let me do the talking. If they ask you direct questions, it's fine to answer, but keep it brief and factual." The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front where the 5 board members sat. Patricia was in the center, her expression stony. Donald Kramer was to her left, along with 2 other board members I recognized but didn't know well. To Patricia's right was a woman named Helen who I'd spoken to a few times at neighborhood events. About 15 other homeowners were scattered in the chairs facing the board. Apparently word had gotten out that something interesting was happening. Patricia banged a gavel on the table. "This emergency board meeting is now called to order. We're here to discuss the legal complaint filed by Daniel Harrington." Rebecca stood. "For the record, no legal complaint has been filed. I sent a letter outlining violations of your own bylaws and requesting remediation. There's a significant difference." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Miss Chen, you're welcome to observe, but this is an HOA board meeting and you're not a member." "I'm here as Mr. Harrington's legal counsel," Rebecca said calmly. "And under Ohio Revised Code Section 5312, homeowners have the right to have legal representation present at any HOA proceedings that concern them." Donald cleared his throat. "Patricia, let's just move forward. Miss Chen, thank you for being here." He looked at me. "Mr. Harrington, The board has reviewed your attorney's letter and the documentation of the 3 violations in question. We'd like to discuss a resolution. Patricia cut in. The violations were legitimate and properly issued. Mr. Harrington has violated community standards repeatedly. Helen, the board member on Patricia's right, spoke up. Patricia, that's not accurate. We've reviewed the bylaws and the violations were not properly issued. They lacked required documentation and weren't approved by the full board. I have the authority as president to issue violations, Patricia snapped. No, you don't, Donald said firmly. The bylaws are clear. The president can identify potential violations, but they must be reviewed and approved by a majority of the board before fines are assessed. You've been issuing violations unilaterally for months. Patricia's face was turning red. I have been maintaining standards that the rest of you are too weak to enforce. You've been harassing homeowners, Helen said. Mr. Harrington isn't the only one who's complained. I've had 5 people contact me in the past week about unfair violations. The room started buzzing with conversation as other homeowners began speaking up about their experiences. Rebecca remained standing, and I could see she was taking notes. Donald banged the gavel. Order, please. Let's stay focused. He looked at me and Rebecca. The board, with the exception of President Hendricks, would like to propose the following resolution. We rescind all 3 violations issued to Mr. Harrington. We refund the $400 he paid for the first 2 fines. We agree to review and revise our violation enforcement procedures to ensure compliance with our bylaws, and we formally apologize for the improper handling of this matter. That's completely unacceptable, Patricia said. You're undermining my authority and setting a precedent that homeowners can just lawyer up and ignore the rules. Patricia, Donald said, his voice hard now, you don't have the authority you think you have. And yes, homeowners absolutely can seek legal counsel when they believe they've been treated unfairly. That's their right. Rebecca spoke up. The board's proposal is a start, but it's incomplete. In addition to what Vice President Kramer outlined, we need compensation for legal fees incurred as a result of the HOA's violations of its own bylaws. To date, Mr. Harrington has paid me $2,200 in consultation fees and retainer. Patricia laughed harshly. You expect the HOA to pay for your lawyer? That's absurd. It's standard in cases where an HOA violates governing documents or acts in bad faith, Rebecca said. Ohio law specifically allows for fee shifting in these circumstances. The alternative is we proceed with litigation, in which case we'll seek not only the legal fees but also damages for harassment and emotional distress. The board members other than Patricia looked at each other. Helen said, Can we have a recess to discuss this privately? 15 minutes, Donald said. The board members filed into a side room and the meeting room erupted in conversation. Gary came over to me. Dude, this is amazing, he said. Patricia looks like she's about to explode. Other neighbors came up to thank me for fighting back and to share their own stories. By the time the board returned, I had a mental list of at least 10 other improper violations Patricia had issued. The board members took their seats, and Donald spoke. We've had a discussion and taken a vote. By a vote of 4-1, the board agrees to the following terms. We rescind the 3 violations issued to Mr. Harrington and refund $400 in fines previously paid. We agree to reimburse Mr. Harrington for reasonable legal fees up to $2,500 upon receipt of an itemized invoice from his attorney. We commit to reviewing and revising our enforcement procedures within 60 days. And we issue a formal apology for the improper handling of these matters. Rebecca looked at me and I nodded. My client accepts those terms, she said. We'll need the resolution in writing within 5 business days. Agreed, Donald said. I'll draft it myself and send it to Miss Chen for review. Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in this board's decision. This is a betrayal of everything we've worked for. You can call for whatever you want, Patricia, Helen said. But the vote is done. We've corrected a mistake. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting room. The other board members looked uncomfortable but relieved. After the meeting, several homeowners came up to ask Rebecca for her business card. She handed out about 10 before we made it to the parking lot. Well, Rebecca said, that went better than expected. Usually these things drag out for months. What happens now? I asked. Donald sends me the written resolution, she said. I review it, you sign it if it matches what was agreed, and they send you a check. You pay me and we're done. Honestly, Daniel, this was about as clean as these cases get. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Donald emailed Rebecca a draft resolution on Wednesday. She reviewed it, suggested 2 minor clarifications, and he sent a revised version on Friday. I signed it electronically, and the following Tuesday, I received a check from the Meadowbrook Heights HOA for $2,900. The $400 in refunded fines plus the $2,500 in legal fees. I thought that was the end of it, but things took an interesting turn about 3 weeks later. I was at home on a Saturday morning when Donald Kramer knocked on my door. He looked nervous. Daniel, do you have a minute? He asked. Sure, come in, I said, leading him to the living room. Donald sat on the edge of the couch. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. After our meeting last month, several more homeowners came forward about violations Patricia had issued improperly. We're talking about dozens of violations over the past 18 months. Some people paid fines, some people did expensive remediation work they didn't actually need to do. How many homeowners? I asked. At least 20, Donald said. And when we started auditing the HOA finances more carefully, we found some discrepancies. My stomach dropped. What kind of discrepancies? Money that should be in our reserve account isn't there, Donald said. We're talking about approximately $35,000. Patricia has been the sole signatory on the HOA bank account, which was already a violation of our bylaws. She's been depositing fine payments, but they're not all showing up in the ledger. Oh my God, I said. You think she's been stealing? We think she's been embezzling, yes, Donald said. The rest of the board voted to remove her as president and as a board member entirely. We also voted to refer the matter to the police. I wanted you to know because your lawyer is probably going to be contacted as part of the investigation. Has Patricia been arrested? I asked. Not yet, Donald said. The police are investigating. But we've frozen the bank accounts and Patricia has been banned from accessing any HOA funds or records. 2 days later, Rebecca called me. I heard from the Columbus Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. They're investigating your HOA for possible embezzlement. They asked for copies of all my correspondence with the board. Donald told me, I said. This is crazy. It's more common than you'd think, Rebecca said. HOA board members sometimes think of the association funds as their personal piggy bank, especially when there's no oversight. The fact that Patricia was the only one with access to the money was a huge red flag. Over the following weeks, the investigation unfolded. It turned out that Patricia had been issuing violations and collecting fines, but only depositing about half of them into the HOA account. The rest she'd been keeping for herself. She'd also been inflating expenses and pocketing the difference. In total, the police estimated she'd embezzled over $40,000 across 18 months. The neighborhood was in shock. People who'd been intimidated by Patricia's aggressive enforcement style now felt doubly victimized. They'd been harassed and stolen from. In early May, about 3 months after my icy driveway violation, Patricia Hendricks was arrested and charged with theft in office, forgery, and tampering with records. The local news covered the story, and it became a cautionary tale about HOA oversight and accountability. The Meadowbrook Heights Board, now operating under Donald's leadership, implemented a series of reforms. All financial transactions required 2 signatures. Violation procedures were completely revised to include proper documentation, board review, and homeowner due process. And they brought in an independent auditor to review the past 3 years of finances. Rebecca helped several other homeowners who'd paid improper fines to file claims with the HOA for refunds. The HOA's insurance policy covered most of the embezzled funds, so homeowners eventually got their money back. As for me, I ended up with a unique claim to fame in the neighborhood. I was the guy who fought back against the tyrannical HOA president and accidentally uncovered a major fraud scheme. People would stop me at the neighborhood pool or the community barbecues to thank me. Gary, my neighbor, probably said it best one evening when a group of us were standing around talking. "You know, Daniel, if you just paid that $250 fine for the ice, Patricia would probably still be stealing from all of us. Your stubbornness saved the neighborhood." "It wasn't stubbornness," I said. "It was principle." "Whatever it was," Gary said, "it worked." The case against Patricia moved through the court system slowly, as these things do. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in going easy on her. The amount of money involved and the violation of trust made it a serious case. In August, about 6 months after my driveway violation, Patricia pleaded guilty to 1 count of theft in office and 3 counts of forgery. The other charges were dropped as part of the plea agreement. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, though the judge made 2 years of that suspended pending good behavior. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $42,000 to the HOA and complete 200 hours of community service after her release. I attended the sentencing hearing with Zara. Rebecca had told me about it, and I felt like I should be there. Patricia looked diminished in her orange jail jumpsuit, nothing like the domineering figure who'd stood on my porch at dawn issuing violations. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Patricia stood and addressed the court. Her voice was shaky. "I want to apologize to the residents of Meadowbrook Heights," she said. "I let the power of the position go to my head. I started believing that I was protecting the neighborhood, but I lost sight of what that actually meant. And when I started taking the money, I told myself I deserved it for all the work I was doing, but I knew it was wrong. I knew it was stealing. I'm sorry." The judge wasn't swayed. "Miss Hendricks, you held a position of trust, and you violated that trust systematically and repeatedly over an extended period. You harassed your neighbors and stole from them. The impact of your actions goes beyond the financial. You created an environment of fear and intimidation in what should have been a peaceful community. While I appreciate your apology, I believe a custodial sentence is necessary." After the hearing, Rebecca and I stood outside the courthouse. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Honestly, kind of sad," I said. "I mean, she deserves punishment for what she did, but it's still sad to see someone throw their life away like that." "That's a healthy perspective," Rebecca said, "but don't forget that she made choices consistently and deliberately. You stood up for yourself when she tried to bully you, and that's what exposed the larger problem. You should feel good about that." I did feel good about it, mostly. The neighborhood was definitely better off without Patricia's reign of terror. Donald turned out to be an excellent HOA president, running things fairly and transparently. The board published monthly financial reports and held regular open meetings where homeowners could voice concerns. The new violation system was much more reasonable too. If someone was out of compliance with the CC and Articus, they received a friendly notice with a suggested timeline for remediation. No fine. Only if they ignored multiple notices did it escalate to potential fines, and even then, the full board reviewed and voted on each case. Life in Meadowbrook Heights became peaceful. I could wash my car without worrying about getting cited for water spots on the driveway. I could put up Christmas lights in whatever shade of white I wanted. I could take my trash cans out the night before pickup without fear of a dawn raid from the HOA president. One autumn evening, about a year after the icy driveway incident, the neighborhood held a community appreciation barbecue at the park. Donald had organized it as a way to rebuild the sense of community that Patricia's behavior had damaged. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers when Helen from the HOA board came over with a plaque. "Daniel, the board wanted to give you this," she said. "It's a small token of appreciation for your courage in standing up for homeowners' rights." The plaque read, "Presented to Daniel Harrington for outstanding service to the Meadowbrook Heights community. Your actions exemplified the principles of justice and accountability. Thank you." "This is really nice," I said, genuinely touched, "but I feel like I should share it with everyone who came forward about improper violations." "We're recognizing them too," Helen said, "but you were first. You took the risk when you didn't know if anyone would back you up. That takes guts." As the evening went on, kids played on the swings and neighbors chatted over plates of food. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly in a way it hadn't been in years. Several people made toasts thanking the new board for their transparency and fairness. Gary raised his beer and said, "To Daniel, for having an icy driveway at exactly the right time." Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. To Daniel and his icy driveway. Later, as Zara and I walked home under the streetlights, she took my hand. "You know," she said, "when we moved here, I wasn't sure about the whole HOA thing. My parents always said HOAs were more trouble than they were worth, but I think we actually ended up making it better." I said. "Okay, you," Zara admitted, "but I supported you. That counts." "It definitely counts," I said, pulling her close. We reached our house, and I looked at the driveway, clear and ice-free in the mild autumn weather. It was hard to believe that a thin coating of ice on that same asphalt had set off such a chain of events, but that's how it works sometimes. You stand up for yourself over something small, something that seems almost petty, and it ends up mattering in ways you never expected. If I just paid that $250 fine, Patricia would have continued her pattern of harassment and embezzlement. Other homeowners would have continued suffering under her unreasonable enforcement. Tens of thousands of dollars would have continued disappearing from the HOA accounts. Instead, I hired a lawyer, fought back, and accidentally became a neighborhood hero. Rebecca Chen continued to be my lawyer for minor things, reviewing documents when Zara and I refinanced our mortgage, handling a small contract dispute I had with a contractor. She became a friend, someone we'd occasionally meet for dinner. She loved telling the story of my case to other potential clients as an example of how standing up for your rights could lead to unexpected but important outcomes. "The icy driveway case," she'd call it, and I'd always laugh. Donald served as HOA president for 2 more years before stepping down, citing work commitments. By then, the association was running smoothly, and his successor, a woman named Maria Santos, continued the reforms he'd implemented. The neighborhood association became something it was supposed to be all along, a group of neighbors working together to maintain their community, not a dictatorship run by one aggressive person. I did run into Patricia once, about 2 years after her sentencing. I was at the grocery store, loading bags into my car, when I saw her in the parking lot. She'd served her year in prison and been released on good behavior. She looked older, worn down by the experience. We made eye contact, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I should acknowledge her or pretend I hadn't seen her, but she walked over to me. "Daniel," she said, "I know you probably don't want to talk to me." "Hi, Patricia," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "Really sorry. Not just for the stuff with you, but for everything. I've had a lot of time to think about who I became and why. I was angry about a lot of things in my life, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it." "I appreciate you saying that," I said, and I meant it. Seeing her like this, humbled and genuinely remorseful, I found I didn't have any anger left. "Are you still in the neighborhood?" I asked. "No," she said. "I had to sell my house to pay the restitution. I'm renting a place across town, probably for the best. I don't think anyone in Meadowbrook Heights wants to see me around. People move on," I said. "But yeah, it would probably be awkward." "I heard the HOA is running well now," Patricia said. "That's good. That's how it should have been all along." She paused. "I don't expect you to forgive me or anything. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong and I'm sorry." "I do forgive you," I said, surprising myself. "You paid your debt to society and you're apologizing. That's all anyone can ask." Patricia's eyes got watery. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She walked away, and I finished loading my groceries. As I drove home, I thought about the strange journey from that morning when she'd woken me up to issue a violation to this moment in a grocery store parking lot. Life has a way of working out in unexpected ways. Standing up for yourself matters, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. The law exists to protect people from exactly the kind of overreach Patricia engaged in, but only if people are willing to use it. I thought about all the homeowners who'd paid improper fines over the years, who'd done unnecessary work to comply with violations that weren't actually valid, who'd lived in fear of Patricia's wrath. Most of them had never considered fighting back. It seemed easier to just pay the fine, fix whatever she demanded, and hope she'd leave them alone. But easier isn't always better. Sometimes you have to take the harder path, hire the lawyer, push back against the injustice, even when it's just about ice on a driveway at dawn. When I got home, Zara was working in her home office. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, and I could see her through the window, concentrating on her screen. I brought the groceries in and started putting them away. "How was the store?" she called. "Interesting," I said. I ran into Patricia. Zara came into the kitchen. "Patricia Hendricks, what did she say?" "She apologized," I said, explaining the encounter. "Wow," Zara said. "That must have been surreal." "It was," I admitted, "but I think she meant it. She's lost everything, her position, her reputation, her home. She did wrong and she paid for it. At some point, you have to let people move forward." "You're a good person, Daniel," Zara said, kissing my cheek. The next week, I got a message from Donald asking if I'd consider joining the HOA board. One of the members was moving out of state, and they needed to fill the position. I thought about it seriously. The old me, the one who just wanted to live quietly and avoid conflict, would have said no immediately. But the experience with Patricia had changed me. I'd learned that sometimes you need to get involved, to participate in the systems that govern your life, rather than just complaining about them from the sidelines. I talked it over with Zara. "It's only a few hours a month," I said, and I feel like I understand now what the HOA is supposed to be. Maybe I can help keep it on track. I think you'd be good at it, she said. You care about fairness and you're not afraid to speak up when something's wrong. So I accepted Donald's offer and joined the board. My first meeting was eye-opening. I saw how decisions were made, how the budget worked, how complaints from homeowners were evaluated. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was important. Over my time on the board, I helped implement several new policies. We created a welcome committee for new residents to explain the HOA rules in a friendly, non-threatening way. We established an appeals process for anyone who felt a violation was issued unfairly. We started a neighborhood newsletter to keep everyone informed about board decisions and upcoming events. Most importantly, we worked to change the culture from enforcement-focused to community-focused. The HOA wasn't there to catch people doing things wrong. It was there to maintain common areas, organize social events, and help neighbors work together to solve problems. We dealt with the occasional difficult situation, of course. There was a dispute between two neighbors about a tree that was dropping leaves in one person's yard. There was a homeowner who wanted to paint their house a color that wasn't in the approved palette. There was someone who kept parking their RV on the street, which violated our rules. But we handled everything calmly and fairly, looking for solutions that worked for everyone involved. The tree situation was resolved when we agreed to have the HOA pay for trimming. The house paint issue was solved by expanding the approved color palette. The RV owner agreed to rent a storage space after we explained why the rule existed. None of it required threats or fines issued at dawn. It just required treating people like reasonable adults and working together. Years passed. My time on the HOA board eventually ended. Term limits meant I had to step down after serving 4 years, and I was okay with that. I'd done my part to help steer the association in a better direction, and now it was someone else's turn. Looking back on the whole experience, from that cold February morning when Patricia rang my doorbell to my years of service on the board, I felt grateful. Grateful for Rebecca Chen's expertise and advocacy. Grateful for Donald Kramer's integrity in standing up to Patricia and doing the right thing. Grateful for my neighbors who supported me and shared their own stories. And grateful for Zara, who encouraged me to fight when it would have been easier to just pay the fine. The icy driveway incident became part of neighborhood lore, a story people told new residents about why the HOA operated the way it did. I'd overhear people at the community pool talking about it, usually getting some of the details wrong, but the core message was always the same. Stand up for yourself, even over small things, because you never know what larger issues might be at play. I sometimes wondered what would have happened if I'd been a deeper sleeper that morning, if I'd slept through Patricia's aggressive doorbell ringing and only found the violation notice later. Would I still have fought it? Or would I have grumbled and paid the fine like so many others had done? I'd like to think I would have fought it regardless, but I'm not sure. There was something about being woken up at 5:30 in the morning, about seeing Patricia standing there with her clipboard and her scowl in the dim light of dawn, that made the injustice feel immediate and personal in a way it might not have otherwise. Sometimes timing matters. Sometimes the specific circumstances push you to act when you might otherwise have let things slide. And sometimes, when you act, you set off a chain of events that changes everything. My icy driveway at dawn was one of those moments. A small injustice that revealed a much larger problem. A violation notice that led to an investigation, arrests, imprisonment, and ultimately a complete transformation of how our HOA operated. All because I decided to call a lawyer instead of just paying the fine. All because Rebecca Chen knew the law and wasn't intimidated by an aggressive HOA president. All because Donald Cramer and other board members were willing to look honestly at what had been happening and take action. All because the legal system, when used properly, can protect ordinary people from those who abuse their authority. On a spring evening several years after everything happened, Meadowbrook Heights held its annual community barbecue at the neighborhood park. I was there with Zara and our daughter Emma, who'd been born 2 years earlier. She was running around with the other kids, her laughter mixing with the sounds of conversation and music. Gary came over, holding a plate piled high with food. "Can you believe it's been 5 years since the great HOA scandal?" he said. "Has it been that long?" I asked. "Yep," Gary said. "I was thinking about it the other day. This neighborhood is so much better now. Remember how everyone used to be stressed about getting violation notices? Now people actually talk to each other, help each other out. It's what a community is supposed to be." Maria Santos, the current HOA president, was at the grill. She saw me and waved me over. "Daniel, can you take over for a few minutes? I need to grab more propane." "Sure," I said, taking the spatula. As I stood there flipping burgers and hot dogs, watching the neighborhood kids play and the adults chat and laugh, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what I'd been fighting for, even if I hadn't fully realized it at the time. Not just my right to not be harassed over a frozen driveway, but the right of everyone in the community to live without fear, to be treated fairly, to have their voices heard. Zara came up behind me and put her arms around my waist. "Looking thoughtful," she said. "Just thinking about how things worked out," I said. "Better than we could have imagined," she said. Emma ran up, her face flushed from playing. "Daddy, can I have another juice box?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, pointing her toward the cooler. As she ran off, I handed the spatula back to Maria, who'd returned with the propane. "Thanks," she said. "Hey, I wanted to tell you we're putting together a history of the neighborhood for our 20th anniversary next year. I'd love to interview you about the whole Patricia situation, if you're willing." "Sure," I said. "As long as you include all the context about how the board fixed things afterward. It's not just a story about one bad person. It's about how a community came together to make things right." "Absolutely," Maria said. "That's exactly the angle we want." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The park lights came on and someone started a fire in the pit. People pulled chairs closer and someone brought out a guitar. The evening shifted from organized event to spontaneous gathering, the best kind of community moment. I sat in a camping chair with Zara on one side and Gary on the other, Emma asleep in my lap. The guitarist was playing soft folk songs, and people were humming along or chatting quietly. "You know what's funny?" Gary said. "Patricia actually did us a favor in a weird way. If she hadn't been so over-the-top terrible, we never would have reformed the HOA. We'd still be coasting along with the same problems, just less obvious." "That's a generous interpretation," I said. "Maybe," Gary admitted. "But sometimes it takes a crisis to create change. Your icy driveway was the crisis we needed." I looked down at Emma, her small face peaceful in sleep. I thought about the neighborhood she was growing up in, one where the HOA existed to serve the community rather than control it. One where neighbors helped each other instead of reporting each other. One where fairness and due process mattered. That was worth fighting for. That was worth hiring a lawyer, standing up at board meetings, enduring Patricia's anger and the uncertainty of not knowing how things would turn out. The fight over my icy driveway at dawn had been about more than just a $250 fine. It had been about principle, about justice, about refusing to be bullied. And in the end, it had been about creating something better for everyone. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, I carefully stood with Emma in my arms, trying not to wake her. Zara gathered our chairs and cooler. We walked home through the quiet streets of Meadowbrook Heights, passing houses with warm lights in the windows, driveways clear of ice on this mild spring night. Our home came into view, and I felt that particular satisfaction of returning to a place that was truly yours, where you belonged, where no one could fine you for trivial violations at dawn. I tucked Emma into bed, kissed her forehead, and went downstairs where Zara was making tea. "Good night," she asked. "Great night," I said. "Great neighborhood." "Thanks to you," she said. "Thanks to a lot of people," I corrected. "But yeah, I'm glad I made that phone call to Rebecca Chen. Best money I ever spent." We sat on the couch, drinking tea and talking about nothing in particular. The comfortable conversation of people who'd been through something difficult together and come out stronger on the other side. Outside, the streetlights cast their steady glow on empty sidewalks and quiet homes. No HOA president prowled the streets at dawn looking for violations. No one lived in fear of arbitrary fines or harassment. The community was at peace. And my driveway, which had started it all, sat empty and clear under the spring stars. Just a regular driveway on a regular street in a neighborhood that had learned the hard way what happens when authority goes unchecked, and then learned the better lesson of what happens when people stand up for what's right.